Neicee Jordan. Today's spotlight is on author of Behind Closed Doors, Taneisha Neicee Jordan. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for coming on. All right. So, Neicee, thank you for joining the show. So, Neicee is a wife, mother, grandmother, and of course, new author of the book Behind Closed Door, where she talks about her life dealing with childhood molestation, toxic relationships, abuse, and suicide attempts, and how she was able to persevere. She also shares more of her complex story in the latest episode of Beyond the Scars with our own Gianni and Olivia. So, Neicee, again, thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate you joining.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So, before we get into your story, Neicee, so feel free to share a little bit about yourself. And of course, we always ask everyone if you can add something in there that we simply can't Google about you.
Oh, well, as you mentioned, I am from up north. I am from Northeast Ohio. And I've moved to North Carolina, I think of 2014, to get away from the snow that you guys were talking about. So I am here enjoying the one day of snow. Um, and I am an entrepreneur. I am now an author, which I love.
Yay.
Something I never thought I'd do because I hate reading and I hate writing. So now I'm an author.
Okay,
Yeah,
two
seriously.
things not to do if you're an author, not to hate if
You
you're an
say
author,
that
right?
to an English
That's
professor.
weird.
You say that to an English
That's
professor.
right.
Grab it in the heart.
The English professor.
It's weird. But I'm loving the journey though.
Good.
But one thing you can that you can Google about me is that I am really passionate now about writing, especially about the things that I've been writing about. And so I am looking, hopefully, in the near future, I would love to have a nonprofit organization to help, teens that's going through, what I've gone through. And so that's what I'm hoping.
That's amazing.
Beautiful.
So,
Amazing.
That is amazing.
so your story is pretty harrowing. You know, as a child growing up, dealing with molestation from family members, and then an abusive relationship as an adult. What drove you to write this book? Because I have a similar story to yours. I mean, minus the molestation, but I've always wanted to write a book about it. I even put out an outline um, and started to really actually get into it, and then I just kind of lost the drive for some reason. So, how did you find the drive and inspiration to write your book?
Well, as women, a lot of times we like to write down our feelings. And it seems that we can express more how we feel by writing. So just so happened a particular day that I was, upset. And I know a lot of my anger is driven from my past. So I just wanted to start writing, just getting everything off of my chest. And just so happened, as I'm writing about, why I'm angry, my husband said, you know what? You should probably put all of your anger into a book. And so I said, you know what? I think I'm going to do that. So I just started writing down things that had happened to me, from when I was a child until, current. I just got to writing and he said, turn it into a book. So I said, you know what? Okay.
Wow.
Because now I'm able to actually get everything out versus, verbally, I was unable to do that.
Yeah.
But writing, yeah, I just put it all on paper and just turned it into
Amazing.
Oh,
I think somebody's
your
muted.
mic. Neil, your mic might be muted.
It is. So, Robbie, what is your question?
Neicee, thank you so much for the work that you're doing because I think that most of us are victims of some form of household trauma or trauma in relationships. So I think what you're doing has great value. While I was researching you a little bit, I came across the GoFundMe that you have going on for the Lorraine High School students.
yeah.
And I really wanted you to give you an opportunity to tell us more about that. So if you could please share what you're putting together for these young adults and what happened.
So, as you guys know, I am from up north, and I did attend Lorraine High. Lorraine High was Emerald King High School, and now Lorraine High. So being from that city, um, there's a lot of us who have gone through what I went through. And so when I saw that video that was put out, teenagers have put out video of them crying out. I received the video, so when I saw it, immediately, of course, it took me back. And they were crying, they were pouring out their hearts to, the teachers, the other students, explaining, what had happened to them, and they were not being heard. So for me, instantly, it was like, you have to figure out something to do. I can't save the world. However, I thought, you know what, there has to be something done for these kids because they're crying out for help, and obviously they're not getting it. And so, or they're not being heard, according to them, they're not being heard.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to put together some type of event that will allow them to come together with me and several other adults from that city to talk and express, what is on their heart, what's on their mind, and be able to release it with no judgment. And so right now I'm put together the GoFundMe, so I could raise money to put this event together, as well as purchase, a number of books and journals for these.
So,
Yay.
comment online from Jacqueline Robinson. The real Me Too movement, founded by a sister in Harlem, was all about allowing young people to have a safe space to speak about their abuse. Unfortunately, it's been colonized and bastardized by Hollywood actresses. Olivia, the other host of Beyond the Scars, I appreciate that Neicee actually printed the book and journal. The internet stuff just isn't the same. Melanie Rochelle James, I'm so glad that your husband was supportive. All right. Johnny Storm, question.
Yes. So, Neicee, I know that you mentioned you did, along your journey, find more passion with writing. Do you have any new books coming out or anything that you may do, that any other writing prompts or anything else that you would author?
Absolutely. Currently, I am finishing up my children's book.
A
So
Oh,
children's
that is
book.
actually in the hands of an illustrator. So that will be done this month. Well, I'm sorry, February. Um, so it's
Nice.
for the age
Wow.
4 to 8. It's the behind closed doors, good touch, bad touch. So
I
I'm
love that
super
kind of book.
excited about.
Wow.
I'm also looking to do a few more books pertaining to, the same thing, the good touch, bad
Yeah.
touch, but for older children. Still trying to work that out, but I
Yeah.
definitely had to get a children's book out, for the children, especially with my grandson. He's 5, and then I have a 1-year-old granddaughter, and I wanted to get a book
Oh,
that will
yeah.
help them as well. So that is actually the out. I'm excited.
Okay. All right, children's book. That's great because I think when I was listening to the episode on Beyond the Scars, one of the things that struck me is when you said the difference now about telling your parents when something is wrong versus how you felt as a child, telling your parents that you didn't know it was wrong, and you didn't know to
Right.
tell your children, your parents, that something wrong was happening to you. So, doing a book like this, kind of brings that to light. So,
Mhm.
all right,
Absolutely.
Liz, your question.
so one, I want to honestly applaud you again for, coming forward and sharing your story with us, but also for utilizing the power of the pen, the power of writing, because I think a lot of times, when something happens to us as humans, as women, as men, when we experience trauma, sometimes we can't speak, but we can write. And so I think you are proving that, you can heal and get your voice out, maybe not speaking it, but putting it down on paper. And I say that as someone who talks a lot. I have a big voice, right? But I also, I mentioned before, I'm an English professor, I'm a writer, I'm a journalist. So I'm used to kind of doing both. But I too have a similar story. I also am a survivor of child sex abuse. And in the moment, in listening to your episode, your Beyond the Scars episode with Olivia and Gianni, um, I didn't like you. I didn't say anything at first. And I think that was one of the few times in my life where I was silenced. Like I was forced into a period where I couldn't speak, I couldn't say anything. Um, and so, but when I did, so we're talking for me, it was between the ages of 9 and 10 and a half. And then it took me maybe another year to say something. But when I did, it was probably at that point in my life, but in my overall upbringing, probably the most courageous moment of me. And so, what made you finally decide to tell, to just give your truth to your family, your parents, if and when you told them, your siblings? Like, what made you feel comfortable in telling your story?
When I finally um, told my parents, I think it was because I just had enough. I was in the middle of, the domestic violence relationship with the domestic violence, and I just had enough. And it was just so much that I had bottled up because even with my relationship, though my parents knew something was going on in that relationship, they didn't really come to me and say, "Hey, we know this is going on." They were the type to stay out the business unless I've come to them with the business. Um, but I just had enough of everything, from the molestation and holding all of that in, from the abuse of the second husband. And so I said, you know what? I need to open up. I need to tell my father,
Right.
my mother, what had happened to me. Though I didn't
Yeah.
come busting in the home to tell them what happened during the physical abuse, I did tell them about the station. Uh, and it was just, I just had enough. I just felt holding everything. It
Yeah.
was just anger. I had so much anger. And it was just time to open up.
And
It was
I'm happy that you were able to do that and have a voice. Were you scared when you had to,
At that
have that
moment to
first
tell
time?
them,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I was because I didn't know how they were going to take it. Especially knowing my uncle at the time, he was locked up. He was
Mm.
in prison for doing 15 years for molesting or raping his girlfriend's 10-year-old daughter at the time. And
Oh,
so that specific day that I went and talked to them, my dad was actually on his way out of the home to go visit him at the prison. And so, to bust in to say, hey, this happened to me, you know, it was tough
wow.
because my dad, first of all, he's fighting cancer. And that was another
Mm.
thing.
mm.
I didn't want to put all of that pressure on him
Right,
because he was sick.
right,
Yeah.
And
right.
so,
Yep,
but I
yep.
had to tell him. And so, yes, I was scared because I didn't know how it was going to affect him. I didn't know. I just didn't know. And so, when I told him, he went to visit with my uncle. What he said to him, I have no idea. I never went back to ask him. And I just wanted to get it off my chest. And whatever happened from that point on, it happened. Um,
Let it go.
so, yeah, I just let it
And
go.
I don't think a lot of people realize whether you are a child or you are an adult. It takes a lot to get the strength to tell what is happening to you, especially if it's in a family, right? If the abuse is in a family, because it's going to shake up the entire dynamic of the
Yes.
family relations, situations, relationships, all of that. For me, when I was still young. I think I was probably 12 and a half, maybe. Um, and that was probably the hardest conversation I ever had in my life with my dad, because I told him first. Um, and I mean, I was shaking, I was kind of talking around it, and then I whispered it in his ear. That's how because I didn't want it to come out of my mouth, really. And so, in listening to your story, I related to that so much. What do you think, or how would you describe, because telling is such a large part of it and it's such a hard part of it, how would you describe your family's reaction? Like, once people started to understand and realize what was happening to you, not only as a child, because we're talking about for you two different phases of abuse, childhood, abuse, but then also of domestic violence within a marriage. So when you were able to finally release, like, what was the response within the family?
So when I told my father about my uncle, of course, he was upset. He was upset. My mom was hurt. Um, and they were the only ones. I mean, my sister, I didn't tell her. She didn't find out till after the book was released.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, wow.
and my mother, she really didn't get the full story either until after the book was released.
Hmm.
They just got a piece of what I told them, but I just got what I needed to get off that day off my chest, and I was okay, but I knew there was a lot more that I needed to say. And so
Mm,
Yes.
there was no other way to do it
Wow.
but to put it on paper to really get it out.
right,
Unfortunately, my father's not here now to know what all
right.
took place, except for
Hmm.
what I told him that day.
Wow.
Wow.
And so where are
This.
you
Wow.
now with your family? Where are
We're
you now with
fine.
your
I
family?
mean, everything is good. Actually, I found out a couple more family members some things happened to them after I
Mm,
released the book. Um, my mother, she was extremely hurt after reading the book because her words to me was, "If I would have known, we would have protected you, but we didn't think we would have to protect you from your grandfather and your uncle." And
mhm.
So
I was never given any signs, I was never showing them anything, that was going on. So,
Right.
like I
there's a few.
said, with the physical abuse, with the domestic violence, they 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 knew, but again, I was grown, so they weren't
Yeah,
really trying to
yeah.
involve themselves unless they really, really needed to.
So let me. There's some comments online. Jose says, "So brave." Mike Winter says, "Empowering moment." Um, and then Jeanette Brown says, "We're often brainwashed by our abusers to think no one will believe us."
Hmm.
She also says, "It is especially difficult when the abuser is a parent, and in your case, a grandparent." My next question is: do you wish you mentioned that your parents only get involved? You just said your parents only got involved when they felt it was necessary. Do you wish that your parents stayed more involved in your life as you were going and asked more questions and wanted to know what was happening so that they could maybe better give you guidance, better protect you? Do you wish that were the case? That they had done something different?
Um, Well, my parents have always been there from day one, and they've always instilled in me and my sister, what we should look for when it comes to, different things. But, as we get older, we're hard headed. We are so hard headed. And so, I basically did what I wanted to do. And honestly, I did not want to involve them when it came to the domestic part of it because, again, my father was sick. And I did not want to stress either one of them out with any of that. So it was like more of me just trying to handle it myself.
Mhm.
My brother-in-law and my sister, they did a lot of the jumping in,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know. So when the abuse was happening, they did a lot of the protecting.
Okay.
And then,
Yeah.
and later we'll tell, them what happened. But yeah, I did not want my parents to get it.
Okay. Okay. Good to know.
And I
There's
think
a.
I think that's common. I think it happens a lot, especially as it relates to hood sexual abuse, as it relates to adult domestic violence. We're not conditioned because you have a lot of parents who say, for example, "I won't let anyone watch my kids unless they're family." Like we're conditioned to
Mhm.
believe that family won't hurt us, but
Yeah.
believe it
Right.
or
Right.
not, family they're the first people that have access to your children, that have
Yeah.
access to us.
Exactly.
And so abusers come in every shape, form, color, gender. And that's what we need to, remember as we're walking through this life. Like the face of an abuser is not something that we could just put on a poster. It could be
Right.
anyone. And
Right.
even as it relates to domestic violence, like,
Yeah.
this person you were married to and you would never think. And then all of a sudden it's just
True.
like, wow,
Okay.
here we
That's
go.
true.
Right.
Wow.
So we're running short on time. I know, Neicee, you've got to go and see your grandkids. But some final comments online. Jeanette Brown says it's so hard. On one hand, it is hard not to be hurt that the people around us didn't see us and help us. At the same time, we were also we were also working really hard to seem like nothing is wrong. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
Paulette Bertrand says, "Thank you so much for coming forward with this. As we know, many do not have the strength to come
Right.
forward." Um, Ade says, "You are a brave soul, Neicee. Continue to stay strong, sending love and light to you. Thank you for having the
Oh,
Thank
courage
you.
to share your story." Um,
Thank you.
so And then let's see. This is Jeanette Brown again. Silence turning in towards ourselves, rounded shoulders, low self-esteem, depression, abrupt behavior change. These are the things. The question was a few things to look for. Yeah, and that's kind of the final question I want to ask is, what should a child, what should a parent be looking for in a child who may be
hmm.
dealing with um, sexual abuse or molestation?
It's so tough. You know, of course you have to watch their pattern. We children, 1 minute they're one way, and then you have to, if they're what's the word I'm looking for? If their behavior is different, you know, that's
Yes.
when you want to really pay attention to.
Okay.
Um, and when they start to be shut off, and quiet, like there's just the behavior, the change in their behavior is
Yep,
the most important.
exactly.
And as soon
Yeah.
as you see
Okay.
that, you want to start asking questions.
Mm.
Period.
Okay.
All right, Neicee. I want to thank you so much for joining us and telling your
Thank
story.
you.
Do you have any final
Thank you
words
guys.
for everyone out there? Any final words before you leave? Any shout outs? Anything you want to say?
I basically, for all of those who have gone through, what I've gone through, you know, I, I just pray. That's just bottom line. You have to pray on everything. And if someone is hurting you, you have to be able to just speak out. Just speak up. Do not hold this stuff in, because it will cause an issue in your future, because it did for me. It took a while to get out of that slump,
Mm-hmm.
but never let someone keep you so imprisoned that you
Oh,
cannot talk. Talk,
Right.
speak, tell someone that you trust. That's the purpose of my
Yeah.
journal. Just tell someone.
Okay. All right, Neicee. Thank
thank
you
you.
again so much for
Thank
joining
you
us.
so much.
Thank you.
Make
Thank
sure
you
you
so
check
much.
out her book, Behind Closed Doors. The link is in the description. Go ahead and get it right now. It's a fantastic read. So thank you again, Neicee, for joining us.
Thank you guys.